I'm Karen Phillip, a passionate advocate for doing good. I always knew I was going to have a career helping people, but I wasn't sure how. I've met some amazing people who seem to understand the what and the how of doing good. We often hear about their work, but who are they? I decided to have a space where they could share about their work and common sense steps to doing good better.
Hi, welcome. You're tuned in to Common Sense Steps to Doing Good. I'm your host, Karen Phillip, and today we have a special guest with us, Sharilyn Hale, who's going to share some incredible insights on how she's been doing good in her corner of the wheel. Be inspired as we uncovered some common sense steps to making a real difference. Welcome, Sharilyn.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you're here with us today. Feel free to tell us more about who you are for those who don't know.
Yeah, well, I want to just comment how beautiful we both look this morning in our pink,
Yes.
which was not coordinated at all. But I'm very happy to be with you here today. And so I'm Sharilyn Hale. I have a consulting business called Watermark Philanthropic Council. I'm based in Toronto, and so I work with generous people, families, to support them in their giving and their engagement in the community. And I work with families across Canada, but also across the Caribbean. I spent some time growing up in Barbados, so it's my second home, but it's also my heart's home. I also done some academic research on philanthropy in the Caribbean, which has informed my thinking and my work, and I hope has been a great resource for others. I do have an academic hat that I wear, so I'm a practitioner, but also an academic. I earned my doctorate degree a few years ago with a focus on governance and philanthropy. And so governance is also a key pillar of work in my business on the consulting side. And I teach governance and leadership at Carleton University, which is in Ottawa, in Canada's only graduate degree program in philanthropy and nonprofit leadership. So I'm coming to our conversation today wearing a couple of different hats. And with one foot in Canada and the other foot firmly in the Caribbean region.
Yes, definitely. And I have benefited from some of your research, your last report about the philanthropic giving in the Caribbean. That was quite insightful. But I want to know what ignited your passion for doing good.
Life stories are very interesting when you're looking backwards. Sometimes when you're in the moment, you make choices and decisions and you don't always understand, where those choices are coming from. But what I can share with you is my first job, my first paid professional role here in Canada was as a fundraiser. I was a professional fundraiser. And it was just my first job after university. And that led to an almost 20-year career working with a range of charities in Canada, doing really wonderful, important work. And I don't know why that was my first job, although I came from a family of givers and helpers. Okay. And so in hindsight, when I think about my journey and, where I am today and how did I get here, I do think it's deeply informed by the seeds that were planted in me by my parents in particular, who had a real heart for people, for service, for sharing, for giving, and I, that couldn't help inform me and how I viewed the world and perhaps my little place in the world. But that time working in the charitable community in Canada was really formative in that I both got to understand the charitable landscape, what it looks like in Canada, how charities really operate, the stresses that are just part of the deal as a charity, but also working with and through others. So working with volunteers, working with boards, working with CEOs, reporting to boards. Change never happens in a vacuum, and no one person is responsible for change. It always requires working alongside others, and that's why leadership is such an important theme in the social sector, in the charitable sector, because we have to be able to do things together. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons for me as I think about my career over the years.
So I want you to put on your academic hat a bit and just explain the difference in the type of resource mobilization. So not because in the Caribbean sector, we don't necessarily have fundraisers as much as we have grant writers. So if you could explain to us the difference from where you started to where you are now and what that is.
Yeah. So as a fundraiser, I would lead programs that we would call them. They were comprehensive. So that would include a range of revenue streams, both individual donors, private foundations, institutional funders. Often in the Canadian context, government funding is certainly part of the overall revenue model for charities. Often that sits outside the fundraising department as such. And typically it is, for many charities in Canada, it is a very large piece of the pie. But on the fundraising side, it could include events. It could include grants, grant writing, certainly to foundations and larger institutional funders, but also individual donors. And I know that is, I know from my experience in the Caribbean that's perhaps a less tapped resource, much more focus on corporate donors, for example, which we have here in Canada as well, but it tends to be a much smaller percentage of the overall. If you look at the charitable dollars that are given each year, corporate dollars are actually a smaller amount. But so in a comprehensive fundraising program, you would have multiple streams of revenue. Okay. So to contrast that to my work today, I work primarily with people who are giving money away. so they might have a private foundation or give through some other structures, and I support them in helping to identify what type of support they want to give, where they want to give it, how they want to give it, as well as how to engage their family, how to be effective in their philanthropy, what things to strive for in terms of impact, and how to be a great philanthropist. So that's where I focus more of my time now. But they're two sides of the same coin, right? That relationship between the needs in charities and fundraisers or even executive directors who are seeking resources to be able to fulfill mission, and then those who can provide those resources. It's a really important relationship, and so having worked on both sides of the coin, it's an interesting experience because both experiences inform the other.
Yes, definitely. And so moving from one side of the coin to the other side of the coin, how would you say your experiences shaped your approach to doing good and working in the social development sector?
I would say I've learned a lot over the years. I mean, one might expect that if you're doing something for a long time, right? You hope to learn a few things. I've been working in the charity space, philanthropy space for over 30 years. And I think some of the key takeaways for me that are just as relevant in the Caribbean region as they are in Canada, as they are in the US, as they are in Kenya, where I've done teaching, where in Europe and everywhere in the world, change happens because people come together and they want to make things possible. And I also believe people are inherently generous, and they want to mobilize, and philanthropy and charitable engagement and volunteering. Those are ways that we are able to strengthen our societies, strengthen our communities, and fulfill important objectives, things that make our lives better, safer, more beautiful, right? And that's what has really inspired me. I think my whole career, working in the space, to be able to see things actually happen. See new projects being launched, new buildings being built, laws being changed that actually have a positive impact on the lives of people who might be vulnerable. These things happen because people come together and want to make a difference, and it happens right across the Caribbean region, just as it happens in other parts of the world. So I think that's something that has allowed me to put a flag in the sand, for this being where I want to work and the type of work that I want to be doing, because it matters and it makes a difference.
I think that's really beautiful. Like, it sounds like if you still have a lot of hope in humanity and the collective good. And that is something sometimes I struggle with. So, like, I used to watch a lot of documentaries. Everybody, if they ask me what I'm watching, I'm like, so I just finished this documentary. But I find that change is so slow and seems not to be happening. It seems like if the same issues are reoccurring just in different timelines. But you're bringing like a breath of fresh air to me, being like, no, change is possible. Sometimes we don't have to look at the big picture, but if we look on the individual level, we can find the hope and the faith that change could happen. And that's like one of my struggles. So, like, because I work remotely or I don't necessarily implement the projects myself, I'm behind the computer, I'm checking your reports, I'm checking the paperwork. If I don't go to the field and see the work that's being done, it's very hard. It's very easy to become disillusioned and not realize that persons are doing what they could do and the best at it. And so beside not only having to go in the field, I think also like just staying in touch and hearing the stories of the change is like one of the ways that I cope with what feels like a disconnect at time between the change that we want to see in the world and what's actually happening now. And I also know that sometimes because change is happening in so slow but at quick at the same time, that it's easy to feel as if we're not doing anything. Because like if you're talking about laws changing, laws don't change overnight.
Correct.
That is an entire process that started way it takes long for laws to change. So what is like some of your coping mechanisms or resistance mechanisms to that kind of burnt out feeling, that feeling like change is not going to come now? Like,
Yeah. I think our space and we have a terminology problem in our space. Like, what is the space? Is it social development? Is it the charitable sector? Is it the third sector? Is it civil society?
Nonprofit sector.
Nonprofit sector. I think it's an inherently hopeful space, because otherwise, why are you there? Right? Fundamentally, it's hopeful because you see something that could be better, something that could be different, something that can be more uplifting, and that needs attention and focus. So coping mechanisms, yeah, it can be demoralizing. There's a wonderful quote. I can't remember where it came from, but it was someone very clever that said, "Nothing worth doing can be completed in a lifetime." Right. And so I think sometimes we can get kind of overwhelmed about the state of affairs, whatever our particular focus may be. We need to have a longer horizon, and sometimes some thick skin. I think we've also seen in recent years that change is not always a straight line in one direction.
Sure.
Right, and so you make some incremental change, and you may be moved back through all kinds of circumstances. You know, we went through a pandemic. That a lot of charitable organizations lost ground as a result of the pandemic.
Yes.
It could be political change. It could be change on lots of levels. And so, that slow ebb and flow, I think is a case for always just regerding ourselves, that we can't stop. And we have to always be clear, where are we going? What is our mission? What is the ultimate objective of this work? Without that clarity of purpose, I think it's really easy to lose ourselves, and for organizations, without that clarity of purpose, it becomes really hard to be well governed, to be well managed, to engage potential volunteers, and to engage donors. We often say, without money, there's no mission. Right? And so to be able to fulfill mission, you need money. And so there's an important relationship there. So inherently hopeful, and things don't always happen in a straight line, in a single trajectory, but we keep at it because we believe it's important, and always being grounded in that sense of mission and purpose. I think is one of the biggest coping mechanisms to not lose track. We often talk about mission in the charitable community,
and avoid mission drift.
And sometimes we forget to talk about vision.
Okay.
Right? Vision being, what is the ultimate end state for what we want the world to look like if we fulfill our mission. And so both can be equally motivating. And in my work with philanthropists and people who are generous and want to be active agents of change as well, we talk a lot about values, mission, and vision, because that becomes the real framework for how they think about deploying their resources.
That is like so much food for thought. And I feel like you're the third person for the year to bring back the point of your mission. There's a fundraiser in the States, Floyd Jones. He said, your alignment determines your assignment. And that has been one of my mottos for the year. And then throughout the year, I had another sad moment. And one of my friends told me, even though the plan may change, the goal should not change. And now you're coming again and saying one of the best ways to fight discouragement is remember your mission and then think about your vision, ensuring that you know how you want to leave the will, what your legacy is going to be, and the values that you're going to contribute, and how those align with those in that you partner with. And that is just so powerful. I do think that we get busy in the paperwork. We get busy in trying to see instant change, trying to solve world hunger. We try to solve it instantly, and we lose that clarity, that hope, and that focus. So I think that's amazing that those are the strategies that you use, and I'm going to remember them and take them into practice. But I mean, but I also feel like those are like the big ones, and then we have like the little ones that we could be using, or that I try to use, going to the gym and trying to be step away from the screens and just being outside for a bit. That's like one of my big ones, just disconnecting. Because like you said, if there's no money, nothing's happening, and then that just heightens the amount of stress that we're under. And I'm not sure if we acknowledge, we in this sector, as we said, we don't know what to call this sector. If we in this sector realizes the amount of pressure that we work under, with the constant demand for ensuring that we have finances, the demand to ensure that we have all the systems in place according to which donor, whether the donor is being an individual donor, a company, or a grant organization, wants to have your stuff in place. The flexibility that we have to continually operate under. Yes, there's some consistencies in it, but it's still, what's the word? It's I'm not finding the word, but the constant change that we always have to go under, that we have to have different regulations for different things. And as a human, we tend to like structure, and we tend to like patterns, and with the constant change, it could also wear on us. So that's something that I'm not sure if we even acknowledge within the sector when we're doing good. It's only talking to you now, I'm like, but this is true.
Yeah, no, it is true. On a couple of different fronts. I mean, certainly in the fundraising side, I've had the experience. I mean, fundraising is high pressure work for all the reasons that you've identified. But I used to work for quite a large women's organization. And we had programs that were really were life and death programs for women. And we had staff, and we had a lot of things that were relying on the dollars that were raised. And so and in some organizations you may not have any government funding, and so the money that you raise, it keeps the doors open. And if you don't raise it, the doors close. And if the doors close, people can be in harm's way.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yes, that's a tremendous amount of pressure to have to carry that. At that same organization, I know for many of the staff who worked directly with women who were in crisis, there was an emotional, psychological, spiritual impact on the staff doing that work. They call it vicarious trauma.
Okay.
And so not all causes or issues in the social good space are dealing with those types of issues, but many of them are, and it can wear on you over time to be exposed to extreme levels of need, of poverty, of harm, of abuse, of exclusion, of whatever. I've heard people talk about that same sense of trauma thinking about climate change,
Yes.
right? And so you're not wrong in terms of acknowledging that there are impacts on people who work within the social good space. I would also add to that challenges around compensation, right? Compensation, benefits. I would say one of the large differences between my experience, what I see in Canada versus the Caribbean, is, in Canada, the charitable sector, it's fairly regulated, but there has been a real shift to a more professionalized model.
Yes.
Where organizations have paid staff. It wouldn't be unusual for an organization to have paid staff. My observation and experience across the Caribbean, there are organizations, of course, that have paid staff, but that's not necessarily the most prominent
No.
model.
Yeah.
And in issues of compensation, I think there's still a sense in the region that work in the charitable community should be only volunteer,
Yes.
and that has impact on the leadership within the charitable space, because if you can only do it in your spare time because you have to actually earn a living elsewhere, that has an impact on how much you're able to do. And if organizations don't have the resources to hire really skilled, talented, bright people to be able to advance the mission, then you may not be able to go as far as what you need to. I will also say, in the Canadian context, there have been some really important conversations, even in organizations where staff are paid, that they're not paid enough, right? So conversations around, what is a living wage? What is
Yeah.
reasonable? Why are we being asked to sacrifice? And by the way, mostly women,
Yes.
often women of color. Why are we being asked to sacrifice financial stability, future well-being, access to benefits, pensions, those types of things? Why are we asked to do that when we're doing good? And so those are really important conversations as well, even in a context that has become more professionalized in terms of organizational structure and paid employees as well. So that is a conversation that I think is relevant in both parts of the world. And is happening in many parts of the world
Yes.
as well.
The whole
Now,
chicken and the egg situation, because if you want superb work and you want to attract these funding and whatnot, then you need to pay me to be able to do the work. This is not work that is not skilled. It's a skilled work that you're asking for.
yeah, yes, it is. And so we need to bring skill to the work, and we need to draw on all the body of knowledge that there is around civil society work, including fundraising, including governance, including leadership. And it's also some responsibility on donors and funders to start paying for it.
Yes.
Right. And so I think donors are increasingly aware that they need to spend money on good people, good talent, good leadership, invest on that side so that they can actually see the results that they're wanting to see. I think good progress has been made on that. Again, through advocacy from the sector, some really important work about redefining what is overhead. Right,
So that's a
overhead
whole conversation.
and administration costs and so forth. For most charities, their biggest cost is staff, but it's staff that fulfill mission. And so, how are staff not mission funding?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think some good progress is being made there, but more work needs to be done. One of my big takeaways in the research that I've done on affluent philanthropy in the Caribbean is just how important it is for philanthropists and funders to invest in the strength and capacity of charities in the community sector, because they can't do it on their own. They need to have the strength and capacity to actually do stuff,
Yes.
and do it at a scale and a level of impact that can really help transform communities across the region. And so that's been a challenge that I've put to philanthropists that support causes across the Caribbean, and I think it's an important message.
That's definitely an important message, and I I hope I see the day when that starts to happen, that there's a lot more funding going into building these skills and ensuring not just building these skills, but ensuring that admin costs should not be a concern of those who are doing good, that they should have those things covered. Um, but you talked about success earlier, and then earlier you talked about your family that was a family of giving, and that shaped the way you view the world. So when we talk about success and the way you view your world, what would you say are some of the high points in doing this way that you do?
I don't view them so much as high points for myself. I think, there have been some really great successes that I've been involved in with other
Yes.
people, right?
The true team
So,
player. So
well, when I work with a client who wants to really make a transformational gift, and being along on the path and that journey, and working with the charitable partner to make it come to life, and that's deeply meaningful and satisfying to me. Appreciating what that gift is actually going to make possible.
yes.
Whether it's in someone's individual life, or advancing research, or access to new medical technology, whatever the case may be, that's deeply satisfying. I worked on a fantastic campaign as a fundraiser around housing, affordable housing for women with mental health issues, so that they could have a base of stability for themselves and their families. Getting that was a very large development that we were able to make possible, and it was made possible through philanthropy and through government partnerships and through community partnerships. And so to start on one side of the project and get to the other side where people are actually have moved in and are living and are experiencing the benefits of the stability, those are the types of highlights that when I think about my career over the years, those are the things that I'm like, wow, I feel so grateful to have been a part of that. Like, how cool is that?
Yes, that is amazing. That is so needed. That's so beautiful, and I thank you for your contribution to the world by seeing that project through. That's amazing.
Well, I don't think we often talk enough about what philanthropy makes possible.
Okay.
So, the root word for philanthropy, the root meaning of that word is love of humanity, love
Okay.
of what it is to be human, right?
Ah.
And so when I talk about philanthropy, it's both the giving and the volunteering. It's private action for public benefit, right?
Okay.
And I don't think we talk enough about what philanthropy makes possible in our communities, right? If we were to
Yeah.
say no more philanthropy, right? What what would our communities look like? And I think if we actually sat down to answer that question, we would be astounded and alarmed, right? Because
Yes.
so much happens around us and we take it for granted and we stop seeing it, right? And but when we see it and when we name it and when we talk about how this was made possible because people who were generous stepped forward, generous with their money, generous with their time, with their leadership, with their networks, right? This thing
Yeah.
has happened. Um, that's pretty cool. It's important to be able to talk about it. One of the things that I found in the research that I did on giving in the Caribbean, the report of which is posted on my website, is that there's some cultural distinctives in the Caribbean where people they don't want to talk so much about what they're doing, certainly what they're giving, rarely how much they might be giving,
Yes.
much more want it to be quiet, and I understand certainly in small islands and smaller communities, right? You're going to want to be thoughtful. I think there's a religious component
Okay.
around that as well in terms of humility and so forth. But one of the downsides when people don't talk or aren't open about their giving is that it becomes invisible,
True.
right? And
True.
I know from my work in the Caribbean that there's a tremendous amount of generosity and volunteerism that is happening today and has been happening for decades. Philanthropy isn't new.
No,
Uh,
it's not.
Ever since humans became into societies, even in small communities, there was philanthropy. So this is not new. It's not a new concept. It looks a little different and it's practiced differently in different parts of the world and at different times. But there's a strong culture of giving and sharing and communal support in the Caribbean, which has allowed the Caribbean to grow and prosper as much as it has. And there's more opportunity. There's more that philanthropy can do. But if we don't talk about it, it becomes invisible, and then we take it for granted or we don't see it and we don't realize what it is actually making possible in our very own communities. And so I think your podcast is a great example of ways to talk about doing good and the good that people are doing, that volunteers are doing, that philanthropists are doing. We need to talk about it more and we need to shine the spotlight on it because that's hopeful, right?
Yes.
And it motivates others to do likewise.
And that is so true. That is so easy to take what we have for granted and not understand the work that was put in. And I want to thank you now for taking that time to explain to us the root of philanthropy and the contribution that it has in the Caribbean. And yes, we need to keep talking about all who's doing good, not only you, but the others in the region. And a lot of persons still don't understand when I say I work with non-profits or I work with NGOs. They still don't even know what that is. So far as for what is philanthropy. And we are the persons who are on the ground, or we are the persons who are helping those on the ground try to ease the burden, try to ease the strain that so many of us are facing with the harsh political times and economic times that we're facing. And you're right, we do need to take time to talk more about the good that we do. Definitely. That was quite encouraging once again. And so tell me, what other steps could we take to talk about others? When I say talk about others, talk about the good that we're doing, because we already said that the NGOs don't necessarily have the funding to have like a big marketing and visibility budget, and then the philanthropists don't want to talk because they don't want to be a target, they don't want to be seen as a cash cow. Do you think that there's other ways that we could do good, we could talk about it, feel proud about it, and encourage others to join?
Yeah, well, that's the work. That's the work. Donors can feel like a cash cow when they're treated like cash cows.
Yeah.
And so certainly, and again, there are different kinds of donors, large institutional funders, government funders. There are different dynamics at play. But certainly for individual donors and even corporate donors are people donors, right? There's a person who will ultimately be deciding, or a group of people that will be ultimately deciding. I think one of the things that I was taught very early on in my fundraising career, which I think is just as relevant today as it was 30 years ago, is just because someone has money doesn't mean they have to give it to you. Right? And so we can't walk through the world with a sense of entitlement about what people owe us, right? And I say that in the context of broader conversations around wealth inequality and why some people have wealth and others don't. I get that, but we also have to relate to people, and it's a very human. It's a very human thing to relate to another person. And if you feel, just in any relationship, if you feel like the person is only there to get from you or take from you, right? It's not the positive exchange, that mutual exchange that could otherwise be possible. And so in good fundraising practice, that is really grounded in genuine relationship and connection, right? And what I know now, having been a fundraiser, but now also working with philanthropists who are wanting to be generous, they want opportunities to do good. Well, guess who has those opportunities? Right?
Yeah.
And so when both sides can approach each other with respect and with regard, really wonderful things can happen. But it starts with conversation, and it starts with building some relationship. Because for charities and social good organizations, you are a mechanism to help philanthropists fulfill their philanthropic aspirations.
Yes.
Right? So it's not like trying to extract money from people who don't want, right? That's a very forceful, negative lens to think about how social good gets funded, right? Whereas if you view it as, we're partners in mission, right? What we're doing, it seems to be that that's also important to you, right? Yeah. So where can we line up? Where can we line up so that we can accomplish some really great things together, right? That's good fundraising practice. right? And it's also, some of those nuances also come from experience over time. But what the best fundraisers in the world, and when I say in the world, I don't mean just in the U.S. Or in Canada but around the world, the best fundraisers are people that have a genuine love for other people, a curiosity about other people, so that they can make those deep connections between what matters to those people and where the connection is with their work, right? And make those alignments. I think that's really, I think it's really important. We're not there to serve donors, right? Donors and philanthropists, it shouldn't be, we're in the business of making them happy, right? No, it's about alignment, right? It's about these are partners with us in this work. And if you approach it through that lens, it changes the whole dynamic. And is inspiring and hopeful, which is where we started this conversation.
Yes.
Right? What are we going to do together? It's not, give me your money so we can do our thing over here.
Yes.
Right? Is what can we do together? Which also means, as organizations are shaping their vision, that they consult, that they hear from their communities and from their donors and prospective donors about, what's possible, what can we do together, right?
Yeah, that definitely gives you hope when you feel like the other person is on the same page as you and they're not using you and they want to do good for a community. So yeah, that is definitely true.
Also about accountability, by the way, that's the other piece of it. So when you receive funding or a charitable donation from a donor, philanthropist, funder, wherever it's coming from, you have to fulfill what you've committed to doing. Mm-hmm. It's not just, oh, thanks, bye, right? Because if they're your partners in mission, they're going to care. They're going to care about progress. Quite apart from the fact that you've made an agreement. And if you can't fulfill an agreement, then that raises a whole other bunch of questions about how you run your business, right? If you're not standing by your word and your commitments. We have often said in fundraising, a giver doesn't become a donor until they've given 2 or 3 times, right? Okay. So you can get lucky getting that one gift, but if you don't do well by it, and by the relationship, you're not going to get a next gift.
Right? I get,
Right? So what you want to grow over time is donors who are with you for the long term, right? And that doesn't happen by accident. It requires, really engaging them as partners in your work, and requires some goodwill on their part as well. But that makes the greatest potential for transformation.
It sounds like to be a good fundraiser, you need to be an extrovert.
Well, that's a topic. That's a whole topic for another podcast because I'm not an extrovert. No. You need to have an interest in people. And sometimes and no slag against the extroverts, but sometimes the people who love to talk so much and shake hands and be social, there's an aspect of that of course you need to do, but what are you not doing when you're doing that?
Okay.
Right? You're not listening. You're not listening and engaging in conversation, finding out what matters to other people. So there's room for everyone in fundraising, but it's not the kind of the stereotypical life of the party person that will necessarily be the most effective, because it's those are very shallow things. You want to get to the heart of the matter, because these are really big issues that we're working on.
Because you want to build that commitment to the person. You want to show that you care about the person. You want to have accountability, showing that you can actually deliver the work, and most of all, care for the same issue, the same social issue that you all want to address. Those are 3 tips for fundraisers who are listening to Common Sense Steps Doing Good. But Sharilyn, we started out talking about your highlights of when you feel deep satisfaction, and you talked about the shelter that you have raised funds for women who were experiencing mental health challenges. But how do you celebrate your wins when this happens? When we sign on the dotted line, or when we see that the amount of money is raised that is needed? Do we have a glass of wine? What do we do to celebrate our wins?
I think it depends on the win, but I like your question, because I think we do need to acknowledge our successes and our progress, which can sometimes be incremental. It's not always a slam dunk, but taking the moment, sharing it with others, I think. Sharing it with those who have also helped make it possible, I think, is really powerful, because, just as it's inspiring for us, it can be inspiring for them as well, and get them ready for the next thing, because the work is never done, right? And so, yeah.
It's not. So tell me, what is the next thing you're planning to conquer?
I don't know about conquering, but I have recently been involved in a new program that is actually helping to train people who advise philanthropists. We look at trends in giving, certainly in North America, the role of advisors to people who want to be generous. I think there's increasing demand and opportunity there. But it's important that for people doing that work, that they have a really good baseline about how to do it well. For the sake of donors and philanthropists, but also for the sake of community. So as an advisor in philanthropy, I always feel that I have split accountabilities. Right, I'm accountable to my clients, of course, because they've engaged me, they hired me, and they have certain objectives, and I need to be accountable to the work that I've said. But I also need to be accountable to community. And that sense of accountability is in part why a philanthropist might hire an advisor, because they may not understand community, or sometimes they think they do, but they don't. And so some of the choices that they may make it could actually make a charity's work harder, or in extreme circumstances, cause harm or unintended consequences. And so, as I work with generous people and families, I always have the community in mind as much as I have the clients in mind, so that I'm fulfilling a duty of care, a split duty of care. And so this new program, I think, will be a really interesting addition to where people can get good education, training, skills development about how to do that work well. And then maybe I'll just end with a word about education. And learning and training. There is a tremendous amount of literature, research, information available about work in the nonprofit, civil society, social good space. And I think it's incumbent, I think we have a responsibility, those of us who work in the space, to learn our craft. and take whatever opportunities we can take, whether it's online or taking advantage of workshops that are offered. It's incredibly important. It demonstrates commitment to the sector, and we need people to do that to advance the sector, to grow it, to advance thought leadership, and so forth. I think it's incredibly important, especially in particular in the Caribbean. When you think of the challenges that the region faces, it truly needs the best and brightest to be deeply committed to the sector, and moving it forward, shaping how the sector is understood, how it's communicated, how it is strengthened. That needs to come from within, for that to be developed. There are both training opportunities available. There are also academic programs available, postgraduate certificates, graduate degrees, doctoral degrees, which I know within the Caribbean region that's a huge commitment for people to even think, about accessing those opportunities. But they're there, and there are people that do it and find tremendous meaning and satisfaction doing that, and are able to then translate that work back in the region to really help make things better. So with my academic hat on, I just encourage people to think about it, because it can be a wonderful career, a meaningful career, a very purposeful thing to do with one's life. And that can come with professional development and learning and growth and all those other really wonderful things. So I just want to highlight that as something for your listeners to have on their radar.
Definitely. I was just like, you read my script, because I was going to end with advice for aspiring do-gooders, and your advice is to get the education, the free education or the paid education as well. And I want to thank you for that advice. What I did not say at the start of the podcast is that I reached out to Sharilyn earlier this year, and she took the time to speak into my life and my professional development. And now she's doing the same for us again, encouraging us to do good and be educated about how we're going to do good, so that we won't do harm and we will have the best practices in the field. So I just want to thank you once again, Sharilyn, for taking the time to share with us a bit about your story, your journey into doing good, from your family to your career in fundraising to where you are now in philanthropy, and your research that you've done in the Caribbean. And the importance of, even when we are celebrating our wins, to remember that it's a team effort, because change happens in community. And not to lose that hope, to have that hope that change will happen, and to keep the hope by staying focused on what our mission and our vision and our values are in doing good in our corner of the wheel, wherever it may be.
Wherever it may be.
Wherever it may be. Thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you.